if you are willing to do harm to the United Kingdom, then you have to ask the question: is why is that individual in the United Kingdom or that group, appearing to be freely operating in our country? It's those sort of things that I don't think we're yet talking about, and I hope that Keir Starmer and his team and Yvette Cooper will begin to think about some of this difficult stuff rather than just saying, oh, we're going to give a bit more money to Border Command. That was already in place.
Yeah.
That is not going to deal with the problem. If it's not dealt with in the next 12 months, I think you're going to see real difficulty for the Labour government.
When you talk about dealing with it, you mean taking on Islamist extremism in this country, or do you mean speaking more to those people who feel that they don't have a voice when it comes to, or don't feel that they're being heard when it comes to their concerns about immigration?
Yeah, I mean, all the above. I think there needs to be a very, very coherent strategy of, one, how do we deal with the current clear and present danger of literally hundreds of people coming across illegally because they see us as a soft target. That needs to demonstrate success very quickly. I'm not sure that's going to happen with just giving more money to Border Command. I just don't see that working without a deterrent. You see it in other countries where there is a deterrent, the numbers begin to fall very, very sharply. I get all the work that going after the gangs and trying to smash them and everything else, but how are you going to do that? Show me the map. Show me how you're going to do that. Then I'll start believing you. At the same time, it's about taking on extremism, whether it's right wing or, as I say to you, like the Brotherhood. Islamist extremism is a very, very dangerous, malign influence in our country on young minds. Creating this atmosphere of hatred for your own country is a bad place to be. And we need to be brave enough to stand up in front of those communities and say that there is a minority of people amongst us in those communities that are at the moment preaching intolerance. And we should be a tolerant society, but we should always be intolerant of intolerance, of that sort of behavior from Islamist extremists in our country.
Why haven't we done that, in your opinion?
I always try to push to for example, prescribe the Brotherhood. I was always, there was pushback. I never served in the Home Office as to why we shouldn't. I just think it's the least we can do. You've got to tilt against the wind. Imagine, Theo, right? You're a cleric. You're an imam in a mosque anywhere up and down the country, in Birmingham, in Leicester, in Bradford, and wherever, right? London, and a couple of guys come into your office in the mosque and say to you, look, we've set up a house around the corner. If there are any young men or women who you feel are passionate and are fired up about the injustice in whatever, some part of the world that they make an excuse about, or they use as a reason, send them round to me, send them round to the house, and we'll feed them and talk to them and preach to them. What do you think that imam's going to do? He's going to be worried that these guys, are thugs, right? They're going to bully him. He'll send those vulnerable young men and women round for a chat. Now, if we make it illegal, if we prescribe groups like the Brotherhood, then that imam has a reason to push back and say, I'm sorry, I can't do that because I'll go to jail. It's illegal in our country to do this sort of stuff. And it's that sort of thing that I think we need to start thinking about and taking on the argument with elements within the community who will say, is that really fair or right? Well, I think it is. I think if you are willing to do harm to the UK whilst gaining all the benefits of British citizenship or British residency, then we should take you on and say, no, you can't do that in our country.
But is there always a danger? Do you accept that there's potentially a danger that part of the problem is that we've got the extreme speaking, but actually it's very difficult to try to find a common ground in the centre, because every time when we speak about the extremes on either side, then it becomes fuel, if you like. We end up in a situation where to talk about Islamist extremism can be used by those on the far right, and of course vice versa, that those in Muslim communities feel under threat. And we see, and I was speaking to Fiaz Mughal a couple of weeks ago on this program, who turns around and says, there were many Muslims in Muslim communities in Birmingham that came out as a show of force because they felt threatened by what they'd seen on social media. How do we speak to those communities in the middle who actually just want to live in peace, and they don't want to feel threatened? They don't want to feel that they could be targeted, and then at the same time confront, as you say, those on the extremes.
It takes leadership for you. I mean, essentially, we've got to be very clear with every community. Let's take the Muslim community for a second. We've got to be very clear that law breaking and taking the law into your own hands is unacceptable in our country. Mm-hmm. We've got to be very clear that the majority of Muslims are law-abiding, hard-working people who are patriotic to their country, the United Kingdom, and are doing great. And we should celebrate that. But there is a minority that are a malign influence on their own communities that hijack the religion of Islam and speak with a sort of false authority and get airtime. And we need to take those people on and take them on through the legal system as well as through the court of public opinion. Let's look at the other side, right? And the extreme right. Again, we should be very clear that we will not countenance any law breaking, any rule breaking, right? That happens, we're going to come down on you like a ton of bricks, right? But we, at the same time, talk to young white men, young men as well, who probably have the worst outcomes in terms of social mobility in our country, and explain to them what we're doing to be on their side, to help them, give them that ladder of opportunity, get them through education, get them into a skill, a plumber, a carpenter, an electrician, a doctor, a nurse. There is so much good that we do in our country that I think, you look at what Michaela School's doing, and that the results just the last few days of both the GCSEs and A-levels, right? It can be done, but it needs leadership. It's the problem, as you know, I've served in many departments in government, from vaccine to education to Treasury, and then as Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster and chairman of the party, is scale, right? You have these pockets of success. What we've got to do is then take those successes, learn from them and scale them so that they begin to impact all communities. That is leadership. That's what it takes.
Just on leadership, who do you think has set out the best mandate to lead the Conservative Party?
I think that all candidates are doing well. They're all great communicators. If you look at the six names and remember the sort of the David Cameron DD party conference,
I do,
where Cameron was incredibly fluent, and I love David Davis and his friend of mine, but he will tell you, he made a mistake with that speech at party conference. I think all six will give an outstanding performance. Their challenge is unity. I think the greatest threat to our party today is not, we're not short of ideas and policies. In fact, the other way around. The right of centre think tanks, the ability to come up with really sound, good conservative ideas is there. The problem is that we still want to tear chunks out of one another, and people are not yet prepared to unite, unfortunately, and that breaks my heart. And I just think until we're ready to unite and come together, we will be shouting into the void.
Is the problem when it comes to uniting? Is ultimately the problem when it comes to uniting the fact that Nigel Farage is just front and centre of right-wing politics right now?
The only reason he is because we decided to form a circular firing squad. whilst in government. I think it all began post-Brexit when there are elements in my own party who then were very unhappy with Boris and blamed him for the outcome of the referendum, and then chose a different path. And then others obviously joined for different reasons throughout his administration. But to get to a stage, Theo, where MPs were proud on going on TV and radio and media and talking about the five families having a midnight meeting. I exaggerate to make a point. Was depressing for me to watch, because you just put yourself in the mind of a hardworking Brit watching television that night. You'd be thinking, we're not some sort of mafia. This is we are meant to be a responsible party of government, and we got to a stage where it felt like more like Game of Thrones than being a responsible governing party.
When you say when you mentioned Boris Johnson, was that ultimately just the first big mistake, just getting rid of Boris Johnson? That there needed to be a sort of a reality check that actually he was your big election winner. He was the man who delivered that 80-seat majority, and you needed to find a way to keep him as prime minister despite everything that had happened.
Well, look, he delivered an incredible majority. 2019 was the election that effectively united the right and gave no oxygen to reform at all, and that must be recognised by all of us, and Boris getting the credit for that. I think as I said to you, I think it began much earlier. I think that we never reconciled the party post-Brexit. Even though Boris then delivered that 2019 victory, we've never really sat down and come back together. And the factions just got more and more extreme and more vicious towards one another. And I think people looked at that and said, no, enough. These people don't deserve to be lent our vote. And that's what happened with the election.
Do you think it can? Do you think the rift can be healed? Do you think that unity can be found? There is a way forward.
It has to be.
It's existential, by the way you're saying.
Completely. I honestly think this could be a moment in history where you could literally pinpoint the timeline where the Conservative Party fell apart, and politics is so volatile today with the means to information, the ability. You were mentioning earlier in your introduction, NVIDIA and what's happening with AI and the world changing so rapidly in terms of the sharing of information. If we don't unite, if we don't come together, then we're going to be in irrelevance. We'll very quickly see people fill that void. People will fill that space, and it won't be us. And people will
be Nigel Farage.
Move on. Yeah, well, it could be. But as I say, if we don't exercise discipline, why should we be given the opportunity to come back to office? There's no reason. There's no God-given right by the Conservative Party to govern. We have to earn that right.
Nadhim Zahawi, former Cabinet Office Minister, thank you very much for your time this morning. I really appreciate how candid you've been.